still going strong. I thought this plant was feminine, but I think it's definitely a masculine plant. You know, the pain endurance, it's the resilience. Yeah, I mean that's life. I guess gets pretty rough, doesn't it? But he's still going strong. It's the resilience, huh? You know, I watched the last upload about. I was talking about the dream experience that I had, the first time experiencing the dragon, right, in the psyche. And I know it all just sounds like fantastical, you know, analogies and mythology, but the way these psychologists, these professional dream interpreters, describe this nature of the great self, the archetypal self, that occupies the reptilian brain, your unconscious, your nature. You ever heard of the Backrooms? You know, like some of those deep psychological movies, and the you know, the protagonist, you know, gets to the end of the line of the narrative and then crosses that threshold of what both the protagonist and the audience are aware of what reality is in the universe of the movie. Perfect example. Look at the Truman Show. Remember the Truman Show? Matrix. Look at these perfect illustrations, right? Backrooms, you know, that the pure mystery and unsettling, you know, environments, eerie environments of I guess it's this space of it's like you find yourself looking at these images, or you know, growing up, you know, playing RPG games, fantasy games, you know, and you'd spend like hours and days literally learning how to exit the perimeters, the boundaries of what is taught to you, you know, in the game. You know, you're playing like a first-person shooter, and all of a sudden, you know, one day you play and you say, you know, I've done this mission 60 times. I've been down this path during this time, during this exact time period in the storyline of the game. And I've been down this path so many times, I could run through this mission blindfolded. Today, I'm not going to go down this path. I'm going to go back to the start of the mission. So before you progress, you turn back, you run back to the start of the mission. And all of a sudden, the game, the console, the computer, the AI is you can't really say it's confused, but it's not going to process it. So you go back to a place at the beginning of the mission, and you don't find anything there. Nothing spawned. Everything has been despawned. And it's just grid. It's just abyss. It hasn't spawned. The program wasn't designed for the player to be conscious, right? The NPCs aren't ever going to go to they're not programmed to enter the backstage, the back rooms, the development areas of the game, of the simulation. I remember I used to do this in a lot of first-person shooters. Best examples, definitely Halo. I remember one of the missions, that's what I did one day, because I used to, me and my cousin, after school we used to play for hours and we'd just go through the missions and we'd go for a cycle, we'd clock it like every week or so, right? We'd complete the game, complete the campaign over and over. It was just pure joy. One day I was playing solo, and it was at the start of the mission, and I went probably a quarter of the way through, and I said, I'm going to try go around the map. I'm not going to go through the conventional way. I'm not going to go through the path that the program has designed for me, that the simulation has designed for me. I'm going to consciously exit myself from the existing program and see what happens. Let's just see what happens. I remember I went back. You could still play it now, right? I got like all the remastered versions. And I went back to the start, right? And there were a few bots there. There was a few parts of the map that despawned, right? Didn't load up. And it's so cool. There were these, they call them, that the developers placed, these Easter eggs. They're called Easter eggs. You'd climb up to a random ledge, random tree, right? And you'd find like a grenade there, or like a special weapon or something. And you pick up the weapon. You're like, wow. 99.99% of players will never even know this weapon existed behind this bush. The back rooms. It's you find yourself at at a place that wasn't really expecting anyone conscious to be there, which automatically gives off this eeriness to the experience, right? This eerie experience. I remember a few years ago as well, once at night, this was years ago actually, in my early 20s, me and a couple friends, we went back to my primary school, not even my high school. We bypassed that whole era. So I think I drank too much tea. We bypassed that whole era, and I went to the primary school, and it was at night, and I was not ready for that experience, man. You want to gauge, do you want a sense of the feeling that I'm talking about? Go back to your primary school at night, right? If you're in your 20s and over, right? Don't even do it yet as a teenager. If you're in your 20s and above, you go to your primary school at night, jump the fence if you have to, and you will know the feeling I'm talking about. You're familiar with the setting, you're familiar with the place, the memories, the visions, but you're present there at a time where the setting was not designed for you to be present at that time. So you find your consciousness to be present at a place that, you're not normally present in. Remember, I was like walking around, seeing all the playgrounds and the oval area where, play all the ball games. Oh man, the experience was just heavy, man. Like, that was a paz out, man. That was a paz out. I remember I was riding my bike, a push bike, right? It's probably 21 or 22, but probably I didn't go to the school in over 10 years, right? And I remember seeing this covered footpath, right? It's like a long corridor, and it was covered, right? And there's like poles. There's like just like the middle poles on each end, and it goes for like, probably 50, 60 meters, pretty long. And seeing it at night, because it had the lights on, the neon lights. I don't know if they're neon, but they're like, the night lights. And I never saw those lights on before. And seeing that there the first time at night, I just kind of paused at the end of the corridor. It was the most eerie feeling, I think the best way to explain what I felt and experienced in the dream that I was talking about in my last upload was this feeling. I should have explained it and elaborated it like this, but I was so concentrated on more the experience of the dragon and trying to describe the nature and the presence that this thing had, right? It's the archetypal self. You are in the presence of your God self. You're in its presence. You can smell it. And it's like energy you can smell. And when you smell it, You know, like I was saying in my last upload, it gives your ego, you know, a gauge on like its power, how this thing lives, what it lives off, right? Remember the lines, the blood. You know, you smell it off the fur. You know, they're living off. You know, you smell the flesh and the blood that they've been devouring, their nature, right? The raw, primitive survival aspect of this unconscious being. The Jungian psychologists refer to it as the great self, right? The archetypal self. So in the video, I was obviously so focused on describing it as the dragon experience that I had. You know, I was onto something like towards the end of the video, you know, when I was talking about you smell, you know, that animalistic smell when you go, if you ever smelt like a zoo lion or something up close, and you smell the blood. See, I was unconscious to it. It's, you know, every video, it's like every share or journal that I can reflect on. You progress literally in consciousness, right? The increments, remember the increments. And it's like I was trying to get out, I was trying to explain that you smell the scent of this primitive creature that's been living off flesh. It's been devouring the flesh of another creature that's perhaps unconscious to its presence. I mean, you see the blood stains and you smell it and you look at this creature and you think, like, I mean, you know all of a sudden that this thing is not here for any other purpose but to survive. And it does so by living off the flesh and blood. It's prey. See, the great self, your archetypal self, doesn't know that it has prey. It just needs to survive. And it will take advantage of your unconscious. It's not personal. It's not trying to kill you. Like, it's not trying to, you know, terminate your consciousness, you know, and send you, you know, to the consultation room. It doesn't know. It's not aware of the effect that it's having on your human body and your human mind, your ego. It's not concerned either, right? That's why they call it a reptile. It's adaptive. It's cunning, you know, like I said in the previous video. it's perfectly camouflaged. Perfectly camouflaged, man. The way it manifests itself into the world so subtly. You literally accidentally manifest it. You externalize it completely unconsciously, unaware. And all of a sudden, you find yourself winning either 5 national championships of some kind if you're like an MMA guy, a BJJ guy, or a boxer, or a bodybuilder. All of a sudden you've abused yourself into winning 10 awards. You've all of a sudden, you've done a Alex Hormozi, and you've gone from absolute negative to gross company value, a billionaire, in less than a decade. You've done it in less than a decade. You've done what's conventionally done, in what's normally conventionally achieved, in 5 times the time limit. What normally takes 20, 30 years, you've done it in 5 years, right? All of a sudden. You've done it through unconscious sacrifice. You've sacrificed to the great other, right? You've done it unconsciously. It got you to sacrifice, to serve its purpose, its agenda. And your ego was completely under the impression that you were doing only what was necessary for your ego's agenda. I was talking about, like, in the dream, I kept saying, I kept viewing my projection and my idealizing transference, right, in the dream. I guess in the moment, I'm not really... This is why some of my videos may come out a bit schizoid and not as elaborate. It's so hard to be conscious on one thing and describe it, and kind of zoom out as well and be elaborate on what's going on. I was talking about becoming more conscious of my projected self in the dream, right? Specifically in this case, usually it's always family members, siblings, parents, other relatives, close friends. A lot of the times, like I said, it's ex-partners or partners that you're with currently. They're projected contrasexual. So if you're a female, it's seeing your ex-partner, ex-husband, boyfriend, it's your anima. It's your projected male version. It's yourself, literally as a male. With me, seeing my contrasexual, my animus, my anima. Sorry, I still confuse the two sometimes. The anima, right, is the projected feminine. It's your contrasexual. As a man, it's your unconscious feminine, right, in your psyche. So you see your ex-partner in the dream. It's not her. It's not really her. your unconscious, because your ego has projected such a strong identity to this person in real life, it has put a face to the projection, right? Remember, all of your relationships in the external, right, in the real world, are just projections of your unconscious self, right? So in this case, you see your ex-partner, it's not really her, you know, this is what I should have been saying in the last video. This is why it's not really relevant that you're like, don't think about it as, you know, you're still dreaming of, or you're still having, you know, uncomfortable, anxious dreams of either an ex-partner or someone that really caused a lot of trauma to your ego. You know, it doesn't, like, obviously common cases, you know, like I said in the last video, with both men and women, is the first, you know, hard relationship, the first big breakup or whatever, right? It's anyone, man. It could be, you know, parent, guardian, whoever, like, I guess, raised you, you know. A lot of people in the consultations, most of it are parents, actually. You know, mum, dad. So don't think about it as, you know, like, at least as a Jungian student or a neo-Jungian practitioner, that's your approach to the dream. Every single human being in the dream is a projection of your unconscious, is a projection of your identity, your conscious identity, right? If you try to follow along. It's an identity that you're unconscious of, but that you're conscious of in real life. I'll try to give an example. So, in real life, you consciously identify as, you know, you can consciously identify as, you know, whatever you are, an accountant, you know, an accountant at this age, working for this company, who has these friends, who has these family members, right? In the dream, you have a dream, you see Spider-Man. The dream is telling you, you unconsciously identify as Spider-Man. In real life though, not in the dream. There will be a series on dream interpretation. This could probably be the first one. The first journal on dream interpretation. Anyway, back to my last journal. So the narrative of the dream isn't really that relevant, right? It's the narrative is just like the gist, right, of the dream. Don't get caught up in the narratives of the dream. Dreams aren't really structured at all, really. I mean, they do have a beginning, middle, and end, but there's no timeline, right? The beginning could be when you're 6 years old, the middle could be before you were born, and then the end could just be at your current age, right? So there's a timeline in the dream, but it doesn't represent real time, obviously, right? So the narrative, because of that, obviously, the narrative isn't really that important. You see what's happening. You become conscious to your experience watching what's going on, right? So this is what I was talking about in the last journal. When I saw her and I saw this other guy, right? I think it was a weird setting. It was like, I remember now, it was like a massive white, like, it's like a cafeteria setting. There's no one else there, and there's all these tables and, like the benches that you sit on, like in a cafeteria, the long benches with the long tables. It's weird, and I think they had like trays. I didn't get too caught up in the setting, but straight away I knew that this is my anima, right? This is who I used to consciously identify as, right? Which is what I used to idealize. So try and like take your time, try and grasp how I'm explaining. You can't, like in real life, the person is not going to be your ideal identity, obviously, right? But in the dream, that's the thing about the dream. It's your idealized version, right? So you idealize this person in real life, right? You unconsciously, force them into your ideal, right? And then your unconscious identifies with that ideal person. So it projects its entire center of existence and being onto that archetype, right? It's only recognizing, you dehumanize the person, you objectify the person, right? Your idealized projection is an objectification of that person, right? Your unconscious doesn't recognize them as a human, it recognizes them as an archetype, right? That it wants to identify with in order to manifest, right? So when you see the person in the dream, remember it's the idealized version, right? So this is what I didn't get at, obviously, in my last journal. For the first time, I saw this person in the dream while being conscious of my idealized projection to them, right? I mean, I never saw her in a dream while being conscious of this knowledge, right? It's now even being unconsciously aware, right? My unconscious has been, it's all reprogrammed now. So the dream isn't going to work the same way anymore because the ego now is conscious, right? So I think what was happening in that cycle, remember it was like 3 or 4, maybe 5 cycles where I would wake up in the dream and I would see my ex-partner, which is, my anima, my idealized projection of my contrasexual, right? It's the ideal feminine of myself. Maybe that was just an easier way to explain it. True that. Yeah, that's how I should have said it. It's the idealized feminine. It's your idealized feminine self, right? But obviously most people that aren't aware of the Jungian method don't even realize that there is a contrasexual. Sorry, so if the girl doesn't realize that, like, her psyche is part masculine, and a man, especially in the culture, right? In all of Eastern culture, right? Not Far Eastern culture, Asian culture, obviously they're far more aware spiritually. Arab culture, Middle Eastern culture, tradition are so petrified of the contrasexual, right? The men in my culture are so unconsciously petrified of the feminine aspect of their psyche that they end up they're all misogynistic and homophobic. Same with the women. They're so petrified of the masculine aspect of their psyche, of their unconscious nature, that they would rather give it away and project it completely to another man instead of carrying it for themselves, disidentifying with the ideal projection, onto a father figure, which is 99% of the time. Oh man, I can't get it. Look, I'll get into the culture definitely later on. But back to the dream, the whole point is to show you, to try and, it's hard. Like, I am speaking pretty advanced, it's like a conversation with another Jungian psychologist or student at least. If you're not aware of like the method, at least the basic approach of the Jungian psychology when it comes to the unconscious, this is going to sound like Lord of the Rings, pure fantasy, pure jargon. Doesn't really sound as scientific. Oh, trust me, it is. It is 1000% scientific. We're just in the early days of the research, right? But when it comes to the approach of dreams, basically, just the basic gist approach, this is what you're seeing. This is what I was seeing in the dream. And for the first time, that I should have said in the last journal, it was the first time of seeing my anima while my unconscious has now been programmed with this method to know that what I'm seeing is my idealized projection, so it couldn't work. It's like, so I talked about the dream, experiencing the projection, and then what happened in the dream as I was withdrawing the projection because of how conscious I was of, that ideal projection, right? That's the archetypal self. That's your unconscious, true, divine self, right? It's present, but most of it is unconscious. It's projected outwards. It's externalized, right? Everything that the conscious ego cannot bear to be conscious of, it projects it out. It throws it out, right? The archetypal self hates that because it's rejection. You're not getting rid of it. You're just refusing to, your conscious ego is refusing to bear the weight, right? You can't bear the weight, so you project it onto your dad, your mother, your best friend, your husband or your wife. You project your center of being, your purpose of your existence is transferred. You carry here. You carry my whole existence, my center of being. I can't consciously bear it. You carry it for me. I will completely occupy my life with you as the center, carrying everything that I've given to you. And if you fail, at carrying my reason for being. I will hate you. I will leave you. I will sack you. And I will continue the search and find someone who is willing to carry the center of my being, so I can revolve around them, so I can blame them for not being as ideal as I need them to be for my conscious ego to identify with. So, like I was saying, immediately when I opened my eyes in the dream and saw my contrasexual, my idealized feminine self, that my unconscious has put the face, obviously, of the first feminine that I ever idealized, right? The first and only, hopefully, the first and only. And then the male in the dream isn't really, the identity isn't relevant. It's just my projected unconscious of who my idealized feminine, would idealize, right? So this is going really deep. It's really, look, if you're getting this is it's crazy. Like you're gonna be really peasant out here. You know what I mean? Either you're gonna be completely confused. It's gonna sound like, honestly, it's gonna sound like a schizophrenic mess. But if you're really aware of the Jungian approach when it comes to dreams and the unconscious, you know exactly what's happening here. The ideal feminine, right? In your mind, the ideal feminine that your conscious ego would identify with in real life has a projection of the ideal masculine, right? Because it's all being projected. That projection of the ideal masculine, right, you see in the dream. So what's happening here in this dream is I'm seeing my ideal feminine aspect, what I thought my ideal feminine aspect, so what I used to idealize the feminine as, right? In the dream, sitting next to what it would unconsciously idealize as well in the masculine, right? So your projection has a projection of its countersection, right? So let's say if you're a girl, you see your ex-partner, right, in the dream, right? Assuming you're a girl that's, gone through the Jungian psychotherapy, you're completely aware of this method of what's going on in the dream, right? So you would have a similar experience. You would see the ideal masculine that you projected as, right? In real life, you see him in the dream. He's not your ex. He's not your ex. Your ex is someone different to that projection, right? Your ex-partner is not the person that you idealize, right? What you're seeing in the dream is what your conscious ego would idealize in real life. And then you see him in the dream, right? He looks like he is your ex. He has the face and everything because your unconscious is aware of what your first projection looks like, right? Remember, like your eyes are the windows to the unconscious, so it knows physically what they look like. So they paint it. The unconscious literally sets the stage in the dream, and it hires the actors and actresses, right? And it plucks them out, it puts them in, it puts in your family, your siblings, and your whatever, whoever you're projecting and idealizing, right? They're not the actual people. It's not them. So you see the person, right? If you're a girl, you see your ideal masculine, right? Your animus, you see him in the dream. That projection, that idealized masculine, is going to have an idealization of his feminine, which is not you either. Both of them are not part of your identity anymore. So the dream collapses, and then it tries again. That's what happened. So I'd wake up, like I said, I think it was a few times, probably 3 or 4 times, and I'd go back to sleep trying to get the dream again, and it would happen. I'd see the same scene, and it'd go a little bit further, and then in the dream, I'm not phased. I'm watching and I'm spectating, and I'm not phased because I'm like, oh, that's my anima with her animus, right? Okay, and then I'd wake up. Like when you become that aware and conscious in the dream, you physically wake up, right? It's like any dream. It's like when you become conscious, you wake up, right? Think about Inception, right? This is some Inception shit here, right? It's deep. So I wake up, and after a few times now, it's like the puppet master, the director of the dream, right? The great self, the great other, gave up. It's like, all right, damn, the ego now is aware. We cannot play this dream anymore, because the conscious ego has become aware that the projections in the dream are not his identity anymore. They used to be, right? So the dream can't continue on because you don't identify with it anymore. So you can't project it. You cannot idealize what you don't identify with. I'll give you an example. You will never idealize like a celebrity that you don't want to identify with. Like, if you're like a classical music fanatic, it is absolutely dishonorable for you to listen to any bit of instrument or music that was produced after the 19th century. Right? You're not going to idealize Travis Scott or Justin Bieber. You're not going to idealize them. You're not going to project something onto them that you cannot carry for yourself. Right? So, chances are you'll never see them in the dream. And if you do, it means you've idealized them in some unconscious way, right? Anyway, so like I was saying in the dream, when everything collapsed after the last time, and my unconscious now just gave up, but because I was tired, like I'm still dozed off. That's the thing, like once you're asleep, and you wake up from the dreams, like if it's not an anxious wake up and there's nothing really, like if you're completely relaxed and the ego's completely relaxed, right, then you stay asleep. But there's nothing to dream of. That's crazy. More dreams will come, but in that present moment, that's what I was saying about the back rooms. in the present moment, you accidentally placed yourself in the engine room. You know, you went to the play, right? Your conscious ego is the spectator, right? And then the stage is the dream, right? The director, somewhere in the, what do they call them, in the play, in the, can't remember what they call when they're, you know, upstairs, where all of the directors are, the producers, right? Your unconscious, your archetypal self, right, is up in the theatre room. You can't see him. You can't see them. You can't see them or it. All you see is the stage of what's being directed, right? In the dream, you become so conscious that you say, well, okay, hold on, I know what's going on here. I'm in the dream. Because, you know, when you're young, it's like you remember being conscious in the dream, but that doesn't mean you're aware of what the hell is going on. You just know you're in a dream. But you're not aware of your idealized projections, right? You still see people and you think that that's them. You see your mum, you actually think that that's your mum. And you go tell your mum, I saw you in a dream and you were doing this. And, you know, you were running away from me. And I was crying and I was chasing you or whatever. And then your mum's like, oh, you know, she'll come, she'll give you a hug. And she's like, no, I'd never do that to you. I'd never leave you. And she's comforting you because it's true. What she's saying is true. She would never do that to you. You've just idealized an unconscious thing, but you don't know that, right? So the point is, it's not a way to be conscious in the dream. You know, to be able to place yourself in the back room, in the engine room of the dream. You have to be conscious of who the people are and who the projections are, and then they disappear, and then the dream collapses, and you find yourself in the back room. I thought it was going to be like Matrix style, you know, Matrix 2, when he goes to the back rooms and he's talking to the architect. That's what the archetypal self, architect. It's the architect, right? And he's talking to Neo. He's talking to the architect. And he's pretty much, all right. He's getting to. He's like, all right. I know what the whole simulation was about. It was all simulation. You know what I mean? But who are you? What is this? Right? It wasn't a bright white place like you think. It was dark. Like I mentioned in my last upload. It was dark. It was... I could see light, like I said, you know, with my vision. And I felt the presence of the archetypal self, my idealized self, which is a primitive, divine, being, prehistoric. You don't fear it, but you know, you respect it. But you start to consciously, you know, just calm yourself. You're calm while you're in its presence. You're calm. It is aware that now you have consciously become present with it. It's aware. Like, let's say, you know, I keep pointing back because in the dream it was like behind me to the right. So this thing is aware of your conscious self. You're up in the engine room now with it. You're in the unconscious with it. You're literally feeling like you're present with it. doesn't react and you don't react and you just calm. You realize why it was doing this to you, why it was trying to get your conscious ego to dream and have this dream, right? Because it wants to maintain idealized projection so it can manifest. That's its agenda, right? Its agenda is to manifest. So when you're conscious now with it, you're not angry at it because, okay, it put you through years of, like, the thing is, you become aware of how far this thing is willing to go to manifest. It's so raw in its nature and primitive. It'll drive a human being to an absolute unconscious compulsive addiction in order to manifest. It doesn't care. It'll drive the human being to suicide, thinking that the human being wants to sacrifice itself. It will demand so much sacrifice, it'll get you to sacrifice your own conscious being. That's how much sacrifice this thing wants. Right? It doesn't want to kill you. It doesn't know that it's going to kill you. Right? It's the archetype of the self. It's an archetype. You know, it's not. This is the irony. It's like, it's so naturally intelligent and extremely subtle. But you can, like, you can understand and master its nature, right? Remember in The Hobbit, and Bilbo goes into the mountain, and he finds Smaug, and it's like you see how Bilbo is able to, like, he understands how great and powerful Smaug is. He understands Smaug's nature, right? Its nature is it cannot have enough. A mountain literally full of gold is just not enough, right? So Bilbo is aware. He becomes fully aware of what he's dealing with. He becomes fully aware of who he's in the presence of, right? So aware that he's able to, find himself alive in its presence, talking to Smaug in a way, to maintain Smaug's respect, right, with him. He respects Smaug. I remember, he says, like, admires his all the myths and the legends of how great he is, right? But he's still able to fool Smaug, right? He's still able to fool the dragon, because you can't fool something that, is really more conscious than you are. You become conscious in the very moment of what this thing is, how far this thing that you're in the presence of, it's how far it's willing to go to manifest, right? And you naturally respect it. You naturally respect it, right? It is respecting you now because you've disidentified, right? You've broken all of its spells. You've snapped all of them, all the channels, all the idealizing projections that it was trying to drive you to do in order to manifest. You've broken it, right? And you've turned around and you said, hey, you don't have to manifest now anymore unconsciously. It's like you're talking to it. It's like sleeping behind you. That's how it was. That's how it felt like in the dream. It's like, you say, I understand how far you're willing to go to manifest, right? You will have me smoking 15 joints a day to become that unconscious for you to manifest. You will have me working 70 hours a week, labor. You will abuse my conscious ego to death, physically, literally to death in order to manifest. I am aware of how far you're willing to go, right? I am not willing to go that far. I have full conscious inheritance to this kingdom that we share, right? This holy temple, this holy kingdom, this sacred geography, right? We both have inheritance, right? God tells us in all the scripture of the status of the human being, right? Especially in the Quran. God gave the conscious ego inheritance to the sacred kingdom. So you're aware of that. Now it knows as well that you have become aware. Now you have to work out how you're going to manifest this thing. You're going to allow it to do its nature and externalize into your life consciously through individuation.